raising Gannon from the dead?
I mean, I considered whether or not it was truly delusional. Did I consider whether she genuinely believed that? It was probably part of my calculus.
When we talk about self-reporting and your interview with her and the reason why you want to look at all the collateral information, is that one of the reasons why? Is sometimes someone who's charged with first degree murder is going to not be truthful with you in the evaluation because they want to appear to be something they're not?
Yes.
I want to clear something up for the jury. Is the accent from Scotland?
We've been taking bets. The accent's from Scotland.
I just got to keep consistent with all my witnesses, figure out where they're from so the jury knows that. I want to go back to Mr. Tonini's initial cross-examination when we're talking about trauma and that trauma is related to post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you recall that line of questioning that he started out with?
Yes.
Are there studies, or in your opinion, are there any time frames as to when someone might be experiencing delusions or psychosis as a result of trauma?
I don't know that there's a whole lot of research on trauma and psychosis. It is something that happens. It's not part of the diagnostic criteria. So anecdotally, it's something that we see. Trauma itself, the development of PTSD can happen fairly quickly after a trauma happens, or there can be a delayed onset, sometimes up to a couple of years before people start manifesting symptoms. Sometimes not until another traumatic event happens that it all comes crashing down.
This sexual assault that Ms. Stauch was telling you about that occurred between her and the stepfather, did she give you a time frame as to when that happened?
No.
Did you find any collateral resources that it actually happened?
I didn't investigate it.
And is that because it didn't play any relevance to your purpose for the evaluation?
Correct.
Hypothetically thinking, is trauma that happens 20 years ago, is that going to trigger something 20 years from the trauma?
With nothing in between?
Nothing in between.
It wouldn't be typical.
Why?
Well, there would have to be an explanation of what's happening 20 years later that it's an issue now. What was the person able to do, or why was it not impactful at the time? I would just have a lot more questions.
Would the trauma that's impacting your psychosis or delusion, whatever we want to call it, would it have to be related to whatever the trauma was to begin with 20 years ago?
No.
Why is that?
The body experiences trauma and it doesn't have the brain to make sense of it. So it's very physical. So the body just responds to the danger, not necessarily the context or the meaning of the danger. So it doesn't matter what kind of trauma it is.
Would you expect there to be stress or trauma in relation to killing an 11-year-old boy by stabbing them 18 times, hitting them with a blunt force object 4 times, and then shooting them once and attempting to shoot them 2 more times? Would there be some trauma associated with that?
There certainly could be.
Would there be some stress associated with that?
I would imagine so.
Would you expect others to see that an individual who just did that, for instance, in a cross-country drive to Florida?
I would expect if the person was traumatized by that happening, there would be signs of that.
And if the individual was Ms. Stauchs' daughter, who she'd known for 17 years, who's been by her side the entire time, do you think her daughter might notice that there might be some stress or trauma related to that action of killing an 11-year-old boy?
I would think so.
Dissociative identity disorder, is that a particular disorder that leads someone to murder someone?
I don't believe that there's a high base rate for that.
Is there anything in the DSM-5, a mental illness, that has a criteria that says someone with this mental illness is going to go out and kill an 11-year-old boy? You understand why I'm asking that?
Yeah.
Does mental illness lead to murder?
Not in and of itself, typically.
Are there people who have serious mental disorders or mental illness that are able to function in life and society and obey the laws?
Those are two different questions. Can they function to varying degrees? Does a mental illness cause you to break the law? No, it does not.
People who suffer from dissociative identity disorder, do they have recall or they remember the events that might lead them to a forensic setting?
I think that's probably a debatable issue. There would probably be an argument that an alter may have been responsible and the memories don't cross over. So that's hard for me to answer.
And is that because there's not a lot of data on that information?
There's not a lot of data, and I would imagine it varies because somebody with dissociative identity disorder could commit a crime as the primary persona, the host, and it has nothing to do with the alters, so then they would have memory of it. So there's too much information there.
And so just to clear things up, when you're doing a competency evaluation, you're evaluating Ms. Stauch on the day you're seeing her.
Yes.
In an insanity evaluation, you have to evaluate her on the day of the crime.
Right.
And would you look at her actions and the evidence associated with her actions in making that determination?
For the sanity evaluation?
Yes.
Yes.
Would it necessarily mean much in an insanity evaluation how her mental illness may have progressed due to solitary confinement in a jail setting?
It wouldn't speak to her mental status at the time of the offense.
I'll go back to your forensic interview. Counsel asked you some questions about that. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Not specifically.
I believe they asked you about how the prosecution provides you with the reports and things like that.
Yes.
Do you know who provides all the police reports to everyone in this case?
The prosecutor's office is responsible to give it to everybody. Like the state evaluators, they get it from the prosecution, so I request it from the prosecution.
Why didn't you ask that we go sit in on the interview with Ms. Stauch and you during your evaluation?
I can't imagine why I would think that was appropriate or necessary. A forensic evaluation is typically just conducted between the examinee and the evaluator. There can be impacts from having somebody else present in the room. There's statutory protections in the course of a competency evaluation that the information the defendant provides can't be used to incriminate them, so they don't need their own attorney there. If their own attorney isn't there, I don't think it's appropriate that the prosecutor should be there. I've just never encountered that would be a reasonable request.
Have you ever had a defense attorney sit in on an insanity evaluation with you?
No.
Why? Probably for the same reasons you just answered, I take it?
Yeah, and it's never been requested. For evaluations of this level of charge, it would be video recorded, so there would be no need for somebody to observe it because it's being memorialized.
Her social history that you discussed with Mr. Cellini on cross-examination that's in your report, was that based entirely on her self-reporting, what she's telling you?
The portion titled social history, yes.
The thing about miscarriages is based on what she's telling you?
Yes.
The notes that Mr. Cellini asked you about from deputies, were there other notes from mental health professionals within the jail that you relied on or at least considered in making your determinations?
I reviewed her entire jail record, so I was looking at jail deputies, mental health staff, so the prescriber, Dr. Moore's notes, and any deputies that had been tasked with making behavioral observations of her, all of them.
I can just have a second, Your Honor?
You may.
Those are my questions, thanks.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Dr. Grimmett? It's like we have one couple coming.